A while back, we did a video on what it costs to daily drive a Mercedes 240D for a year. Well, our Mark II Golf GTI daily driver has just finished up on its first year of daily driving, and I weighed up the costs as we go along. So, the question is, what did it cost? And more importantly, should I have just bought a modern car? Let's find out. First of all, the car itself. Now, regular viewers of the channel will know this car already, but for you newcomers, here's the lowdown.
This is Lara, a 1989 Volkswagen Golf Mark II GTI. She's got the 8-valve engine, is all original, bar one or two things not really related to running costs, in-car entertainment, steering wheel, stuff like that. She's one of the last of the CE1 models, with the changeover occurring in August of 89, and she was built in July of 89. A previous owner back in the day fitted big bumpers but didn't fit the side trims. Personally, I prefer this, as the more black trim in an old car the better, but your tastes may vary.
The important thing is though, mechanically, she's actually very healthy. She starts first time every time, she gets good compression, good oil pressure, and all the rest. And at the minute, she's got about 142,000 miles on the clock. She was my first car and I've had her for 12 years this May.
But let's go back to around this time last year, with her first MOT in a long time. For comparison's sake, I've done some asking around and a little bit of googling, and garage labour rates vary quite wildly, but the average seems to be around £75 an hour for labour. I did all of the work myself, so I'll try and work out a rate. I know these cars pretty well, so I might be quicker at some jobs than people working on them for the first time, but it is what it is. Another thing to think about is the initial cost of the car. This is hard to factor in for me because I've had her for so long and she only cost me £580 back in the day. To buy a 3-door GTI in similar condition now, you're probably talking around 10 to 15k, reasonably. Now, as a heads up before we go any further, MOT is our version of state inspection in the States, where the government ensures your car is roadworthy. Now, we'll gloss over last year's MOT costs. It's a bit unfair as this was her first time on the road in 7 years, so we'll not hold that against her. But the important thing is the mileage began at 131,220 miles as of her last MOT.
Before we go any further, I'd like to give a shout out to the Custodian app on the iPhone. No, we're not paid, no, it's not a sponsorship. It's a free app. It helps you keep track of your receipts and how much it's cost you to drive your car throughout the year. I like it, I use it, so go check it out.
Okay, so, beginning 23rd of February 2024. Well, not surprisingly, a car that was off the road for 7 years had some teething issues, and not 4 days later, sure enough, the first issue reared its head, the alternator. I checked the regulator and the brushes, all were good, so unfortunately the issue was the alternator itself. Cost for parts, £120 for the alternator, £10 for the belt, as it's good practice to replace this too. About 30 minutes for me to install, and assuming a garage is a flat rate of an hour, let's say £75. £205 total. Next, exactly a month after MOT, the 23rd of March. After getting a little too excited about getting my first car back on the road, I damaged the drive shaft. Thinking that the other side likely wouldn't be too far behind, I replaced both as a pair. New bolts everywhere meant that this wasn't too long of a job, thankfully. For the pair of drive shafts, it was £147.35. About an hour and a half to fit, so roughly £112.25 in labour. £259.60p for a total of £464.60p.
Now, as these numbers start to get higher and higher, I should probably point out that a lot of these are kind of circumstantial or down to my particular car. They're not recurring costs, and if you buy yourself a really good one in the first place, you probably won't have to fix these things straight away.
Then for a while we actually were going pretty well. We have a big leap to June, where a constant misfire and eventual cutting out left me stranded. Turns out the fuel pump was goosed. I mean, after all, it was the original, it was quite old, so understandable I guess. I got a new Bosch one as I was not going to mess around with doing the job twice. Took about 20 minutes to fit, being generous. Cost £86. Labour, flat rate £75. Total £161. Total so far £625.60.
Believe it or not, we're down to the last thing. Leap all the way forward to the 29th of October 2024, where unfortunately she broke down again, but this time not due to old parts but due to cheap parts, which I guess is kinda on me.
A new distributor cap I had fitted during the rebuild turned out to be made of crap. The centre of the cap that distributes the spark to the rotor arm had disintegrated, so the car wouldn't start. To play it safe, I fitted a new cap, plugs, and a set of plug leads just to make sure that the ignition system was healthy. Cost £40. 20 minutes to fit, flat rate again was £75 for a total of £115. Grand total £740 and 60p. £740 and 60p for the year in repairs. That's not too bad. Now if you do it yourself, labour total was £262 25p, so that's £478 and 35p. Now you could have cut that down by only buying the parts that broke, but I'm one for preventative maintenance.
So let's think about that. In 1 year, 10,000 miles, we only broke down twice. One due to a really old part and one due to a cheap part. Now that's not bad going for a car that was actually off the road for 7 years before this. And again, as I said, if you get yourself a good one, you probably won't have to deal with some of these things. But like with anything, like death and taxes, some things are inevitable. And the inevitable thing with all car ownership is tax, insurance, and MOT. And of course, fuel.
So let's start with servicing. Service intervals on these varies quite a bit, but as a rule of thumb, I do a normal service on the car every 10k, as I use them regularly enough to keep them good, which means once this year. I don't tend to do many city miles or stop-start traffic, so I can get away with a bit longer of an interval. For air, oil and fuel filters, plus a gallon of oil for a standard service, the total came to around £50. It would be more if you needed the spark plugs too, but realistically, a service on this is never going to come to more than £100. It takes about an hour to do being careful, so again, £75. So £125 a year for servicing.
This section deals with variables because, well, unfortunately, insurance and taxes depend on what country you live in, what you do for a living, how much you drive, stuff like that. So all I can do is give you a guideline of what I have to deal with, but don't take it as gospel.
This year, the very first year of the Mark II Golf becoming tax and MOT exempt in the UK, as exemption is on a rolling 40-year policy, so costs for those don't really factor for my other Golf, but they do for Lara as she's still a spring chicken. Tax in the UK for cars pre-2001 goes on engine size. As Lara is a 1.8, she's in the higher bracket and is a flat rate of £345 for the year, or £362 if you pay monthly like I do. I have Lara insured on a normal full-time policy, not a classic policy, which means I don't have the same restrictions that a normal classic would have. No mileage limits or usage limits or anything like that. The cost for the year is £373, paying by direct debit at £31 or so a month. Lastly is fuel. Lara, being a GTI, has an onboard computer that measures things like fuel economy, outside temperature, and so on. I did a comparison of old school tank-to-tank measuring versus what it displays on the computer, and to be fair, it's accurate to within roughly half an mpg, which is not bad at all. On average over the year, I saw around 44 miles per gallon, because I mainly do motorway miles. Not bad whatsoever for an 80s hot hatchback. At roughly 10,000 miles, at a fuel cost of on average around £1.35 a litre, that comes to a staggering £1,394 for the year in fuel. But that's more of a me problem. The main figure for you there, I guess, is the 44 mpg, but as always that will vary on your driving style, quality of petrol and all the rest. Now I won't be counting fuel costs for that very reason. Total cost for variables, £735. Total, 1,600 quid including labour. And well done if you're still here.
Which brings us to now with MOT. Now, for the sake of the video and trying to be unbiased, I took Lara to an independent garage to get an evaluation of what it would cost to get her through MOT and to check out what things she needs for me to go and do myself.
Nah, it wasn't too bad. The only things that cost money were ropey ball joints, a bad rear shock absorber, These were ancient coilovers, so no surprise there, and a bad brake junction at the front. There were some more small niggly jobs, but they were my fault. So going on as we started, one shock was bad, so I replaced all 4 as well as the springs. Honestly, parts in general are so cheap for these cars that I was able to buy a kit of 4 Bilstein shock absorbers and apex lowering springs for just £340, and these should last a damn good few years. 2 front bout joints, because if one is bad, the other probably isn't too far off, and I mean they were only a tenner each for good ones. £360 for parts, say 7 to 8 hours for sorting all of the jobs with someone who knows what they're at, so about £600 for labour. Then £38 for the MOT booking itself, leaves it at £960. But the thing is, not everything I've spent this year on MOT is recurring, and shouldn't need to be touched again for many years after, and again, if you buy yourself a good one in the first place, you won't have to deal with these things straight away.
So, where does that leave us?
Well, with 10,000 miles done, all running costs, bar fuel included, the car taxed, tested and insured, a year's driving has cost me £2,560. A month, that comes to just £213. Done by myself with no labour, it's only £1,622.75, which a month is £135, and that is some damn cheap motoring. Yes, I had some annoyances, but only had 2 issues that properly let me down, so it's not the worst when you consider that this particular car was off the road for 7 years before this. This coming year should be even more successful with these issues now already sorted. Hopefully.
Which then means the big question, should I have just went and bought a modern car instead?
Well, being honest, there's 1,001 different factors to it. Your average car payment, just for the car alone, is between £300 to £400 a month, so being real, let's say £350. Straight away, you're talking £4,200 a year just to own the thing. On top of that, we have insurance, tax, and if it's not completely new, MOT. Now, don't get me wrong, repairs are much less likely to be necessary. However, you can guarantee if they do happen, they are going to be so much more expensive than in a Mark II Golf. Remember, you can still get nearly every single part for a Mark II Golf brand new, and even if you don't want to, you're much more likely to be able to fix it yourself. Then you got to factor in servicing. You can get service plans, but they aren't included as part and parcel of the cost of the car. But you do get the new car feeling, a vehicle that, should something go wrong, you can just hand it back to the dealership and say that's your problem, which is hard to put a price on. Well, actually no, that's literally what they do. Plus you have safety concerns, emissions and loads of other things that I don't care about, but you might.
Now I should also say that I am not anti-modern car or anti-EV or anything like that. I am pro doing what the hell I want and telling you the facts. So, the verdict. Well, it's kind of on you, really, isn't it? Do you want to have to put up with maybe once or twice a year having a breakdown and having to get recovered home, but knowing you're going to save a fortune in the long run? Or do you prefer the cushy comfort of knowing that you're not going to have any issues, and if you do, you can just hand it back and say, well, that's not my problem. For me, personally, I can definitely see the pros to both. As a car person and as a semi-fixing cars sort of person, I would pick the older car every time just because you really can't beat how much cheaper that is. Plus, we didn't even really dwell on depreciation that much because while I'm driving my Mark II Golf, it's still going up in value, even adding miles, I know, but your modern car, as soon as you go up the forecourt, bam, depreciation hits and it's worth nowhere near as much. So there's a lot to weigh up, there's a lot to think about, but if you ask me, I think keeping a classic alive is the way to go. What do you think? Is it worth keeping a classic alive? I mean, if you're on this channel, you probably think so, but I mean, let's have a debate in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Tomo. If you would like to support our channel, head to our web store and buy some t-shirts. I'll put the link thingy here that the cool kids on the YouTubes do. If you want to meet some like-minded people and also talk about cars and share your car photos and shit like that, we have a Discord server, which is the thing that people do now. Corey says I need to get with the times, so there we are. I'll put a link to that too. You can't click it, but I'll find out what you have to do. Either way, I'll put it in the description or I'll pin it in the comments. But yeah, Thanks very much for watching. Subscribe for more. I've been Tomo. This is 427 Motorsports. Good luck.